Welcome to Revenge Files, where ordinary families hide extraordinary truths, and justice doesn't always arrive in a courtroom. If stories like this speak to you, tap subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. There is a certain kind of quiet that only visits a house after your children have moved away. It is not the hush of peace. It is the hush of echoes. Every cup in the cabinet holds a Saturday you once shared. Every floorboard remembers a returned curfew, a slammed door, a whispered apology. You make coffee for one, and the simple act feels like a downsizing of the soul. I am 65 years old, and for most of my life, I measured worth in hours. I earned them on graveyard shifts and sold them to morning alarms. I was a bookkeeper, then a night manager at a warehouse, then a man who learned to make money behave because people in my life did not always. There is a steadiness to numbers. They don't gossip. They don't forget birthdays. Add up the right way, and they'll take care of you in the end. That was the plan, at least. The money I set aside across decades, $150,000, not a fortune, but not a joke, was meant to soften the landing of old age. My wife, Irene, used to call it the cushion. When the doctor said cancer, she gripped my hand and said, "We'll still have the cushion." When the nurse said, "I'm sorry," I held the same hand, now too quiet in mine, and thought, what good is a cushion if the fall is already over? After Irene died, I began to think of money the way you think of a coat you might lend. Useful, yes, but not sacred. What is sacred stands at the door when thunder rolls and says, "Come inside." My son, Evan, was thunder and sunlight. As a boy, he could not pass a lemonade stand without critiquing the sign. They should use the word fresh, he'd say, and put the price lower so more people stop. At 12, he repriced our garage sale and moved the folding tables to face the street. At 14, he started a dog walking route and printed receipts. He had that glimmer in his eye a man gets when he sees not just the thing, but the margin around it. "Dad," he said one night, 35 years old, and pacing my small kitchen like a lawyer before a jury, "I've got it. It's not just a coffee shop, it's a brand, a neighborhood living room." He slid a folder across the table. "Rose and Anchor." "After Mom?" I asked, tracing the scripted R with my finger. He nodded. "Her middle name. And the anchor is for you. Steady. We'll do single origin pour-overs, beans roasted in-house. Workshops on Saturday mornings, latte art, bean to cup. Soft jazz. No screens. People are starving for conversation that doesn't glow. It's community." He swallowed, the word lodged with hope. "I've run the numbers. His voice thinned. "I need a partner." Partner. It is a powerful word. It says, "I see you, not as a wallet, but as a witness. I see your years as scaffolding around my dream." "How much?" I asked. He didn't blink. 150. I looked at the folder again. Lease terms, equipment lists, projected cash flow, a logo that made my throat warm. Irene's rose, my anchor. Our boy's hand on the railing of his own future. I heard her voice soft, amused, the way she'd talk when I was being too careful. "Let him try, Frank." The money was for a life. "This is a life, I'll do it," I said. My chest went light and painful, the way it does when you finally tell the truth. "On one condition." He leaned forward. "Paperwork," I said. "We'll do it right. An operating agreement. Shares, not promises. You want a partner? You'll have one." He exhaled a laugh. "Of course." Of course. He stood and pulled me to my feet. Dad, you won't regret this. We signed an agreement in a tidy lawyer's office that smelled faintly of lemon and old arguments. 51% to Evan, 49% to me. He wanted control. I allowed it, because I believed control without wisdom was just a learning curve in costume. I would be there. Wisdom would have a seat at the table, even if it didn't hold the gavel. For 6 weeks, my life became cardboard and sawdust. We drove a rented van to auctions and bought espresso machines, whose chrome winked at us like new teeth. I painted walls the color of an early morning something, between oatmeal and the inside of a seashell. We rehung the door 3 times until it sighed when it closed, the way a door should, if it means you welcome what comes through it. Evan fussed over the menu font, the cup weight, the grind calibration. He was the same boy from the lemonade stands, except now he had calluses of a different kind, not from mowing lawns, but from holding on to a dream. There was another presence in the shop that grew like a vine in a bright window, a woman named Talia. She had a silver ring on her thumb and a talent for choosing the exact right word to make a thing feel inevitable. Pivot, she'd say, as if it were a kindness. Elevate, she'd say, as if there were oxygen on the other side of the syllables. She laughed at Evan's jokes a beat early, the way someone laughs when they've already agreed with the punchline. Consultant, Evan told me, when I asked. Just helping with the brand voice. Talia recommended we replace the sturdy wooden chairs I'd sanded with lighter, minimal ones that looked like you could fold them into earrings. More air, she said. She suggested we sell a limited edition sweatshirt for $95 with rose and anchor stitched like a whisper over the heart. People will feel part of something, she promised. Evan watched her speak the way a man watches a sunrise, as if light had chosen him. On opening day, the line wrapped around the block like a ribbon you tie on a gift you're too excited to wrap properly. We gave out paper roses with the first 100 cups. I wore a white shirt and a navy apron that made me look like the elder brother of a sailor. Evan stood at the register and greeted each person as if he'd known them in another life. Talia floated, correcting signage by centimeters, adjusting the volume of the music by vibes alone. 2 cappuccinos for the Hendersons, Evan called, and a retired couple near the door who had taught our son Sunday school 30 years ago waved like they'd just seen a child return from a long journey. I wiped down tables and refilled the water carafe and learned that people tip more when you look them in the eyes and say their name. When the early rush thinned, Evan brought me a cortado. He set it on the bar before me with both hands. To us, he said. To us, I said. And in my mouth, the coffee tasted like gratitude that had gone to college. We closed that night with the drawer fuller than we expected, and our feet flatter than they remembered. Evan counted. I watched. He whistled. Dad, he said, we did it. I thought of Irene. I thought of that folder sliding across my kitchen table. I thought of time, how it can be a thief, or a tithe. That night it felt like a tithe returned with interest. The first crack in the veneer appeared the following Tuesday, quieter than a cough. A delivery invoice for beans twice the quantity we'd ordered, signed by Talia. When I brought it up, Evan waved a hand. Bulk pricing, Dad. We'll turn them. He'd stopped saying we in the way that included my advice and started saying it in the way a sports team says it to a fan. Still, the register sang. The town posted their cups online. The sweatshirts sold out in a weekend. I swallowed my question and chalked the feeling in my sternum. To age. 2 weeks in, I noticed I wasn't on the schedule. We're trying out a tighter staff list, Talia said, tapping a tablet screen that had adopted a password I didn't know. The brand needs a consistent face. Whose face? I asked, light as I could. She smiled, cinnamon and steel. Evans. My name came off the Instagram bio. The website switched family-owned to founder-led. Small edits like removing stitches from a hem you swear you never needed. On paper, I was still a partner. In practice, I had become an ornament. I told myself, this is what growth looks like. This is what stepping back so your child can step forward feels like in the ribs. One evening, as we locked up, I found Evan in the back office holding a stack of bills marketing, a new grinder he hadn't mentioned, a pop-up event deposit that glowed with Talia's penmanship. "We'll float it," he said. "Momentum over math." "Momentum only pays you in motion," I said. He frowned, the way he did at 7 when I'd tell him no more video games before bed. "We go over this together tomorrow," I added, tapping the invoices. "We look at cash flow. We decide as partners." The next morning, there was a new lock on the office door. "Fire code," Talia said. We had to standardize key access. When I looked to Evan, he looked at the floor. "It's temporary," he mumbled. "We're just streamlining." That afternoon, a boy with hair like a summer field came in, ordered a latte, and paid with a $20 bill that carried a message in small looping script. "You built the cushion. Thank you." Irene's handwriting. I would have known it among 1,000. My heart scrambled back through years and drawers. I used to leave notes in his lunch. She used to tuck scripture in my pocket. But this was a bill she'd saved in a flour tin and written on when I told her we'd be okay. How had it returned to me? How had it come full circle in this place that wore her name? I held the bill like a relic. The boy smiled, not understanding. "Keep the change," he said, "because youth believes generosity is a switch you flip, not a muscle you build." I pressed the note flat on the counter and thought, sometimes the past returns to warn you. Sometimes it returns to steady you for the fall. That night, alone in my kitchen with a coffee I hadn't paid for, I took out our operating agreement and read it the way men read old love letters, slowly, as if the paper might confess something new. There it was. Capital contributions, rights of inspection, remedies in default. Legal prose, but underneath it a promise. If you are faithful, the rules will be faithful too. I slept badly and woke early, as old men and worried fathers do. I arrived at the shop before dawn. The air smelled like cinnamon rolls we didn't sell and choices we had. Evan was there, head bent over the register. Talia near him in a whisper that moved like smoke. "Morning," I said, bright as a bell. They looked up as if the bell had rung at a funeral. "Dad," Evan began, "we've been talking." That's how a chapter ends in families. Not with a slammed door, with a sentence that suggests a committee you were not invited to join. I felt Irene's 20 in my wallet like a palm against my heart. I thought of cushions. I thought of anchors. I thought of how money is only ever a mirror. It reflects who we are when we believe no one is looking. "Good," I said, arranging my face into the calm of an accountant. "I've been talking to some papers myself." Outside, the morning was humming, the kind of hum that means a day has intentions for you. Inside, my son's dream was opening for business, and something else quieter, older, made of clauses and consequences was opening too. The door sighed when it closed. It had taken us 3 tries to make it do that. I took a breath and prepared to learn what would be asked of me next. There are moments in life when a father knows he has just become an outsider in a house he helped build. I stood there that morning outside the café I co-financed, in the cold shadow of the business I had poured every dollar, memory, and muscle into. waiting for a door I had helped hang to open not with warmth, but with warning. My son, Evan, was inside. So was Talia, his consultant, his mirror, his echo chamber. And I, somehow, had become the stranger. "Dad, let's be honest," Evan began, his voice lined with preamble and guilt. "You've done more than we could have asked. But it's time we move in a different direction." He used "we" again. That word used to mean father and son. Now it meant Evan and Talia. I wasn't even sure if I made the list anymore. Talia folded her arms like a CEO, considering a merger she wasn't thrilled about. "We're elevating the brand. The story now is about innovation, youth, energy. It's not personal, it's positioning." I looked at my son, my boy, the one I used to carry on my shoulders so he could see fireworks above the crowd. The one who once cried when he couldn't tie his shoes and told me, "Don't leave, Daddy." Now, here he was, politely evicting me from a life I helped him build. "I see," I said slowly, each syllable pressed flat to hide the rising tide in my chest. "So what's the next step?" "We'd like to buy you out," Evan said, trying to sound casual, like it was a birthday gift idea. I blinked. "Buy me out? With what? Profit? You haven't turned one yet." Evan looked away. "We're close." The second location is in the works. We have interest from an investor, the same word he used for me, back when my money still counted. I reached into my wallet and pulled out Irene's 20. I laid it on the counter between us, not as payment, but as a sermon. "She believed in this place because she believed in you," I said. "She also believed in loyalty and family." Talia reached for the 20 instinctively, as if she thought it was hers to fold away. I put my hand over it first. "Don't," I said. Quiet, but it cut the room like a snapped violin string. "This one's not for sale." Evan sighed. "Dad, this is business. You said you wanted to do things by the book. That includes exits." It was a strange feeling, watching your own son talk to you like you were a liability. A chapter he was tired of reading. "You're right," I nodded. "We'll do it by the book." What they didn't realize, what youth rarely does, is that old men have longer memories and sharper pens than anyone expects. And when you've been overlooked long enough, you stop asking for a seat at the table. You start checking who owns the building. That night, I went home and sat with the documents again. Operating agreement, shareholder rights, exit clauses. I knew every inch of it. Evan had wanted control, but he hadn't wanted to read. By Clause 14b, any disputed exit or forced repurchase would require independent valuation. And by Clause 17, the company was prohibited from major expansion or investor buy-in without shareholder consent, mine included. He had boxed me out of the Instagram bio, but not out of the bylaws. Still, this wasn't about vengeance. Not yet. It was about clarity, dignity. I wanted him to look me in the eye and admit what he'd done, before the weight of consequence taught him in ways I never wanted to. The very next week, the signs began to appear, small, but steady. Evan tried to open a second location. The bank declined the loan. The current café wasn't cash positive, and the original investor, me, was listed as inactive, but not divested. A financial gray zone, and banks don't lend to shadows. Then came the supplier issues. 2 shipments bounced. Rent was overdue. A health inspection flagged the plumbing. Talia began to work remotely, and soon her texts slowed to a trickle. Evan's face looked thinner, his eyes dartier. He stopped posting latte art, stopped smiling in photos. The place that once smelled like dreams and cardamom now smelled like panic under cinnamon. One night, I walked past the cafe just as Evan was closing up. He didn't see me, but I saw him. Slumped behind the counter, head in his hands, sleeves rolled up like a mechanic working on something that wouldn't start. I didn't feel joy. I felt history repeating. I remembered my own father-proud and hard-edged refusing help when his store began to sink. He let the whole thing go under rather than say he needed someone. I swore I'd never be that man. But I also swore I'd raise a son who'd know better than to bite the hand that helped build his empire. A few days later, I walked into the bank. "I'd like to discuss a business loan," I said. "For starting a cafe?" the young man asked. I smiled faintly. "Not starting." Acquiring, and so I began the process. Quiet, legal, surgical. The cafe had taken out a private line of credit to fund the second location. A foolish move, but not unusual in startup desperation. What Evan didn't know was that the lender, a local intermediary group, had quietly listed the note for private transfer. And I, with some effort and plenty of paperwork, became the holder of that debt. My son now owed me, though he wouldn't know it yet. Not directly, not loudly, but officially, legally. I didn't want him to fall. I wanted him to learn. Because some lessons are only taught when your hands are blistered from holding on too tightly to pride. And as I stood there 1 week later, envelope in hand, waiting for Evan to open the door of the cafe he no longer truly owned, I heard Irene's voice in my head again, gentle, firm, ever the lighthouse. "Teach him, but don't destroy him." I was going to do both, carefully, righteously, just as the law and a father's quiet justice intended. You never forget the first time your child calls you sir, not out of respect, out of distance. Evan opened the cafe door that morning, and for a moment, he looked almost relieved to see me, until he noticed the envelope in my hand. His shoulders stiffened. The smile that had just begun to form died somewhere between guilt and suspicion. "Morning," I said calmly. "Hey, Dad," he answered, cautious. "What's that?" I handed it to him without ceremony. "Take a look." He turned it over like it might bite, then slowly tore the seal and pulled out the letter inside. 2 pages, neatly formatted, signed and notarized. It took him less than 30 seconds to skim it, but a full minute for the color to leave his face. You bought the loan." I did. His eyes scanned the paper again, desperate for an error. "You mean the line of credit from Horizon Capital?" I nodded. "They bundled and transferred the debt 2 weeks ago. I acquired the full note, which means ... You own the debt," he said, finishing my sentence in a whisper. "You're the creditor." "That's right." He dropped the envelope onto the counter as if it burned. "You set me up." "No," I said, and my voice was firmer now, but not cruel. "You set yourself up. I just happened to be the one who saw it coming." He stepped back, running a hand through his hair. "This is insane. You're my father, not a loan shark." "And you're my son," I replied, "not a thief." Yet here we are, speaking through legal documents and overdue invoices. He looked like he wanted to scream, or cry, or maybe just turn back time. But I stood firm, not angry, not vengeful, just still. "This isn't how we fix things," he muttered. "No," I agreed. "This is how we face them." I sat down at a table I'd once stained by hand. I remembered when we carried it in together, he had scraped his knuckle and laughed when I offered him a bandage, saying, "It's not a real cafe until someone bleeds on the furniture." "I didn't come here to take your cafe, Evan," I said, but I'm done being erased. He didn't respond. The air between us was thick with pride and unspoken pain. You have two choices, I continued. You can continue to pretend I'm just some old man who lent you a hand once and got in the way. Or you can sit down and we figure this out together. Like partners. Like family. He stared at me. I could see the battle behind his eyes. Talia wasn't there to whisper strategy this time. Just me. Just the man who taught him how to ride a bike, how to balance a checkbook, how to shake a hand without flinching. He didn't sit. Instead, he turned and walked to the back of the café. I heard a drawer open. Then, silence. Then the faint, familiar click of ceramic. He came back with 2 cups of coffee. He sat across from me. He pushed 1 cup forward. Black. No sugar. No cream. Still how you take it? He asked. I nodded. We sat there for a minute, maybe more. Neither of us spoke. I messed up, he said finally. I thought. I don't know what I thought. That I had to do it all alone. That if people knew you helped, it wouldn't feel like mine. It was never about whose name was on the lease, Evan, I said. It was about what we were building together. He looked away. Talia said you were making the brand feel dated, like it wasn't evolving. I smiled faintly. Son, I've been told worse by better people. That got a laugh. Just a small one. But it cracked the surface. I don't know what to do now, he admitted. Then we do what we always should have done, I said. We go back to the books. We fix the holes. We tighten the operation. And you remember who believed in you when this place was still just napkin sketches and dreams. He nodded slowly. And just like that, we began again. Not as father and child, but as 2 men who finally saw each other clearly. Over the next few days, things began to shift. Talia resigned gracefully, but without fanfare. I suspected she saw the tide turning and decided to sail elsewhere. Evan didn't fight it. He said he needed clarity, not charisma. We refinanced the loan under terms that would preserve my security, but give him breathing room. I returned to the schedule 3 days a week. Enough to stay involved, not enough to overstep. We repainted the walls a slightly warmer tone, brought back the wooden chairs, rewrote the About Us page on the website to include a photo of us, father and son, standing in front of the shop, flour on our aprons, and pride in our eyes. Customers noticed. The mood changed. So did the margins. But the biggest change came quietly, one rainy Sunday afternoon. A young couple came in backpacks, tired eyes, clearly tourists. They ordered 2 cappuccinos and sat at the corner table. When I brought the cups over, the woman smiled. Is it true this place was named after someone's mom? I nodded. Irene, my wife. She passed a few years back. She touched the rose emblem on her cup. It's beautiful. You can feel the love in here. Evan was behind the counter. He heard her. He looked at me. And then, without prompting, he added, This place exists because of my dad. He gave everything so I could have this dream. And when I forgot that, he reminded me the hard way. The couple smiled, not fully understanding the weight of his words. But I did. I always will. Some debts, you see, are never meant to be collected. They are meant to be remembered. There's a moment, quiet and unceremonious, when a wound stops bleeding. It doesn't make a sound. It doesn't ask for applause. It just closes, cell by stubborn cell, without fanfare. That's what healing felt like between Evan and me. Not an apology shouted across a rain-soaked parking lot. Not a sweeping moment of redemption with violins playing in the background. Just small, repeated gestures. Doors held open. Coffees brewed right. Numbers double-checked without ego. The things men do when they're learning to be honest again. We didn't erase the past. That's not what men like us do. We document it. We learn from it. We file it next to the bruises we don't talk about and the blessings we never thought to ask for. 3 months after I took over Evan's debt, we were operating in the black. Not by much, but enough. The cafe had a rhythm now. Early morning regulars, writers with laptops, couples on Sunday dates. It was no longer a brand. It was a place. A real one, earned. Not manufactured. We hosted a small event that month, Founders Night. It wasn't my idea. It was Evan's. A way to mark the new chapter. He printed flyers, scheduled the live jazz trio himself, and insisted I say a few words. "You're the anchor," he said. "People should hear you speak." I stood up that night, holding a warm cup in both hands. The room was full. Not crowded, just full. Of laughter, of light, of the kind of quiet that tells you you're safe. "My name's Frank," I began. "Some of you know me as the guy who wipes down tables too slowly and gives free refills when I'm not supposed to." A soft laugh. "But this place wasn't my dream. It was my son's. I just happened to believe in it." First, Evan stood behind the bar, arms crossed, smiling in that modest way he used to as a boy when his Lego towers stayed upright for more than a minute. "I used to think retirement was the reward for a life of hard work," I said. "Turns out, the reward is getting to see your child build something beautiful, even if they forget for a little while who handed them the hammer." That one landed. Evan looked down, not in shame, but in understanding. After the event, a man in his 50s approached me. "Your son's lucky," he said. "I think we're both lucky," I replied. He nodded. "I built something once, too. A business. Gave it to my son. Didn't work out. We haven't spoken in 5 years." I looked at him closely. He wasn't telling me for advice. He was telling me because some truths rattle in a man's chest until they find another man to echo them. "Reach out," I said gently, "even if the answer is no. Sometimes the door only opens if one of us knocks first." He didn't reply, but he left a larger tip than his bill required and shook my hand with both of his. Later that week, Evan and I were closing shop. The register drawer slid shut with a satisfying click. "I've been thinking," he said, wiping down the counter, "about buying back the debt." I raised an eyebrow. "With what money?" He smirked. "Working on it." I leaned on the counter. "Evan, when I bought the debt, I didn't do it to own you. I did it to protect what your mother and I gave our lives to build. You." He didn't speak for a while. Then, finally, "I know that now." He pulled out a new folder, placed it gently on the counter. "It's the beginning of a new agreement. Co-ownership. 50-50. I want us even." Officially, I opened it, read the pages. It was sound, fair, respectful. "About time you read the fine print," I joked. "I learned from the best," he replied. We signed it right then and there, using the same pen we used on the original contract, which I'd kept tucked away like an old photograph. A reminder of where we began, and how far we'd wandered. That night, I walked home slower than usual, not because I was tired, but because the air felt lighter, like the weight of disappointment had finally been shelved, and in its place was something better than profit. Peace. When I got home, I pulled open the drawer where I kept Irene's letters. I added the $20 bill back inside. On a Post-it note, I scribbled a line. "He found his way, just like you said he would." Then I closed the drawer. Some ledgers aren't balanced with numbers. Some are balanced with grace. Every small town has one place that feels like a heartbeat. In ours, it had become Rose and Anchor. Not because we served the best espresso in the state, though. Truth be told, Evan's recipe had become something of a legend. It wasn't the jazz nights or the fresh scones, or even the hand-painted mugs we let local artists sell on consignment. It was something harder to put your finger on. People didn't just visit the cafe. They turned to it, like a memory, like a feeling they didn't want to lose. And perhaps that was the deepest justice of all. The place Evan once tried to claim as his alone, built on a borrowed foundation, had finally become what we always said it would be: ours. But legacy isn't just about what's built. It's about what lasts. And what lasts is often invisible to the eye. One rainy Wednesday morning, I arrived early, before even the baker. The windows were fogged with morning mist, and the air smelled like cinnamon and wet pavement. I unlocked the front door, stepped inside, and turned on the lights one by one. And there, on the counter, was something I hadn't seen in decades. A thermos. Not just any thermos. Mine. Navy blue. Dented on one side. Irene had bought it for me when I started my third job back in the day. I'd left it somewhere years ago. We assumed it had been lost in one of our moves. But here it was. Clean. Polished. Sitting upright, like a memory standing at attention. Taped to it was a note, in Evan's handwriting. For your next long shift. Thanks for never quitting on the cafe or on me. I sat down behind the counter and ran my hand over the thermos, like it might speak if I pressed gently enough. When Evan came in later, he didn't mention it, just nodded at the counter, the way men do when they've already said what they meant to. New barista starting today, he said, setting down his backpack. You'll like her. Name's Jamie, fresh out of college. Reminds me of me. But better tempered. Jamie arrived nervous and eager. She spilled oat milk twice and apologized 5 times for being early. Evan smiled. Early's the right kind of mistake around here. By noon, she was already syncing with the rhythm of the place wiping counters, greeting customers with a sincerity no manager can teach. At one point, I watched her hand a cappuccino to a woman with a toddler on her hip and say, "This one's on the house." "You've got your hands full today." Evan leaned over to me and whispered, "She's gonna do well." I nodded. She gets it. Later, during her lunch break, Jamie sat across from me. "I read the story on the website," she said. "What story?" "Yours. And Evan's. About the loan. The fallout. The repair." I smiled. That was Evan's idea. Said it was part of brand transparency. "It made me cry," she said simply. I looked up. "My dad's a mechanic," she continued. "Raised me and my sister alone after Mom left. We fought a lot in high school. And when I got into college, I didn't want him to visit. I said his hands were too dirty to meet my professors." Her voice cracked. "I regret it every day. I didn't speak, just listened. Working here, it feels like a chance to undo that. A little I reached across the table and gently patted her hand. Then you're in the right place. That's the thing about legacies. You can build them out of bricks, or you can build them out of second chances." A week later, we received an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a check for $1,000 and a note. "I read about your cafe, about your story. I treated my dad badly for years. I wish I could go back, but I can't. Please use this to start something good. A tab for people like him." Evan called it the Anchor Fund, a small drawer at the register where we'd pull from whenever someone came in who clearly needed the comfort of coffee more than the price tag. Word got around, not loudly, just enough. A regular would slip a $20 bill in now and then, A schoolteacher once dropped off a tray of muffins with a note for the customers who forgot breakfast. A retired nurse offered to teach CPR classes in the back room for free. And that's how the place changed again. Not into something bigger, into something deeper. One afternoon, Evan found me sweeping the patio. "You know what I realized?" he said. "That you owe me about 300 hours of unpaid janitorial work." He smirked. "Besides that," I leaned on the broom. "What?" "I used to think the dream was the cafe, the success, the press, the profits. But now I think the dream is just waking up every day, knowing I didn't lose you." I swallowed something sharp in my throat. "Good dreams don't always look like the brochure," I said. "But they feel like home." He nodded. And then, for the first time since he was a teenager, he hugged me. No tension, no performance, just his arms around mine. Like maybe he finally understood that a father's love isn't a loan to be repaid. It's a legacy to be honored. You can learn a lot about a man by the stains on his shirt. Grease means he's fixed something. Ink says he still writes things by hand. And coffee? Coffee stains are the most honest of all. They mean he's stayed up late, shown up early, that he's poured himself into something, sometimes literally, and didn't care what it cost the fabric. The cafe had been open just over a year when the local news station reached out. They'd heard about the Anchor Fund, about the baristas who learned CPR on their breaks, about the anonymous donors who left envelopes in the tip jar, about the note from Evan on the website that simply read, "I forgot the hands that held me up." But my father never let go. This cafe is for him, too. It had gone semi-viral. "I don't know, Dad," Evan said, flipping through his emails one evening. "Do we really want the publicity?" "You're afraid they'll see your dirty mugs?" I teased. He chuckled. "I'm afraid they'll ask questions I don't have polished answers for. Then give them the real ones." We filmed the segment the following Thursday. A cameraman, a woman with a warm voice and overly large cue cards, a half-dozen customers who suddenly sat up straighter and ordered the most photogenic drinks they could imagine. I stayed behind the bar, wiping down the counter, pretending not to notice the lens, until the reporter approached me. "Mr. Franklin," she said, "you're the co-founder, right?" I nodded. "What made you invest your retirement savings into your son's cafe?" I looked at her, then at Evan, standing nearby with his arms crossed, and an expression halfway between fear and faith. "I didn't invest in a cafe," I said. "I invested in a boy I believed in." The coffee was just the medium. She paused, blinked, smiled like someone who'd just heard a line worth stealing. After the segment aired, business doubled. People came not just for the coffee, but for the story. They wanted to sit at the table where we signed the second agreement. They asked to take photos near the Anchor Fund drawer. Some asked Evan to autograph their sleeves. "I feel like a fraud," he confessed one night, drying mugs, "like I don't deserve this attention." I handed him a rag. "That's because you don't. Not yet. But you earn it by waking up tomorrow and doing it all over again. That's what makes it real." He nodded slowly, then asked a question that stopped me cold. "Do you think Mom would be proud?" I turned toward him. "She already was," I said, "long before the cafe, long before the screw-ups. She saw it, even when I didn't." He didn't speak, just leaned against the counter and stared at the empty espresso machine like it might whisper an answer. "I miss her," he said. "Me too." Sometimes, that's all you need to say. The next morning, Evan brought in a wooden frame. Inside it was Irene's original recipe card for her cinnamon coffee cake. Handwritten, lightly stained with batter, corners frayed from years in a kitchen drawer. He mounted it next to the register. No plaque, no explanation, just her words in her hand. Add love last. It always rises. Customers noticed. Some asked. Others didn't. But every single one of them lingered at the counter just a little longer. Legacy isn't loud. It doesn't always wear a suit or ring a bell. Sometimes it's just a battered card in a frame. Sometimes it's a thermos with a dent in it. Sometimes it's a coffee stain on a father's shirt, still warm. And late one night, after the doors were locked, Evan and I sat at the front window, sipping what was probably our 6th cup that day. "You ever think about retiring?" he asked. "I did," I said. Then I realized retirement's just what you do when you've run out of reasons to wake up early. He smiled. "So I ruined that for you?" I smirked. "No, you saved me from it." We sat in silence for a while. The streets outside were empty. The neon glow of the sign reflected in the puddles on the sidewalk. Rose and anchor, built on memory, held up by grace. Balanced, finally, not just in the books, but in the heart. And though neither of us said it out loud, I knew. This was no longer a story about betrayal. It was a story about return, about learning how to carry each other again without debt, without pride, without keeping score. Just love. Just legacy. Just two men and the coffee they'd made peace over. Names matter. Not just the ones we're born with, but the ones we earn, the ones we lose, and sometimes the ones we have to reclaim. For months after our reconciliation, Evan called me Dad again. Not Frank, not Sir, and certainly not the stiff, distant tones he'd once used when Talia hovered nearby, suggesting I was a relic. But something strange happened one Saturday afternoon when a corporate consultant from a growing chain of cafes came in. She was scouting locations, just browsing, she said, though she ordered 3 different drinks, took meticulous notes, and dropped a business card that glimmered like an invitation to sell your soul. Evan handled her with ease, polite, confident, friendly, but non-committal. But when she asked, "Who's the owner of this place anyway?" he said something I didn't expect. He pointed at me. "That's Mr. Franklin, the founder. My father." I didn't say anything right away. But the title, Mr. Franklin, landed differently than Dad. It wasn't cold. It wasn't formal. It was honoring. He didn't call me partner, or co-owner, or silent investor. He called me what I'd stopped expecting to be called in public, his father, with pride. The consultant left with a box of pastries and a promise to circle back, which of course she never did. But I wasn't thinking about her. I was thinking about that moment. Because there's something sacred in being claimed, in being renamed, in hearing your child say to the world, not just, "This is my dad," but "This is the man behind everything I've built." That night, Evan and I sat down with our book's monthly figures, vendor updates, our forecast for the holidays. And halfway through discussing a supplier's markup, he closed the folder. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous words," I replied. He smiled, then turned serious. "I want to change the name." I blinked. "What?" "Not the café," he clarified. "The business, the official documents, the LLC. Right now it just lists me as managing member. You're listed as capital investor. I want us both named." Officially, I raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "You used to flinch at the idea of sharing the credit. I used to think credit was the point," he admitted. "Now I think permanence is. I want your name on this place as long as mine is." It was quiet after that, just the soft tick of the wall clock, and the hum of a fridge compressor in the back. Irene would have liked that, I said. She would have demanded it, he replied. And so we did it, filed the papers, updated the licenses, added a small wooden plaque near the register. Rose and Anchor Coffee Company, established by Evan and Frank Franklin, father and son. It wasn't flashy, no spotlight, no PR blast. But people noticed. And more importantly, Evan noticed. Because something changed in him after that. He began arriving even earlier, staying a little later, asking me more questions. Not because he didn't know the answers, but because he wanted to hear mine. He started watching how I talked to customers, how I handled complaints with a quiet calm that 20-somethings can't buy. "How do you do that?" he asked once, after a customer returned a drink and snapped. "I said almond milk, not oat." I shrugged. People don't want perfection. They want to feel heard. Fix the drink. Look them in the eye. Let them leave feeling like they mattered. He stared at me a second, then said, "You ever think about writing a book?" I laughed. "About what?" "How to be underappreciated until it pays off." He smiled. "No, about being a real owner." And maybe that was the phrase that stuck with me most. A real owner. Not in ink, not in contract, but in the marrow of the place. That week, a couple came in asking for a table in the quiet corner, the one with the warm lamp and the view of the street. We'd rearranged it a month ago. Evan overheard. He turned to me and whispered, "Think it's time we put it back?" I nodded. And when we did, the customers smiled like they'd come home. That was the moment I realized. A business isn't just built on money. It's built on memory, on noticing, on care. Later that night, as we locked up, Evan turned to me and said, "I don't know what I did to deserve a second chance with you." I looked at him and answered the only way I knew how. "You didn't. You took it, and you didn't waste it." He nodded, then handed me the keys. "Can you open tomorrow?" he asked. "Why?" "Jamie's got midterms." "I've got a date, but I don't want this place closed, not even for a day." I took the keys, not out of duty, but out of pride, because this place was no longer just a coffee shop. It was our name, poured daily into mugs, scrawled on receipts, and whispered in the quiet corners where healing happens. And the next morning, when I opened the doors and switched on the lights, I didn't feel like a guest anymore. I felt like a founder, like a father, claimed, and finally, seen. Some numbers tell you everything. Profit margins, supply costs, year-over-year growth. But some of the most important things in life, they never show up on a balance sheet, like how many regulars smile when they see you behind the counter, or the way a child clutches their parent's hand while waiting for a hot chocolate, or how, after all the betrayal, all the heartbreak, all the bitter mornings, I now looked forward to unlocking that front door every single day. The coffee shop had become more than a business. It was our reckoning, our redemption, and, in a quiet way, our confession booth. People came in not just for caffeine, but for conversation, for comfort, for the safety of a small ritual that reminded them they were alive and not alone. One rainy Monday, a woman named Angela came in just before closing. She wore a heavy coat, dripping at the shoulders, and her eyes were swollen from tears she didn't bother to hide. I didn't ask questions. I just handed her a cup of our house blend on the house and set it down in front of her like it was medicine. She took one sip and exhaled like the storm had been in her lungs, not the sky. "I haven't been in here since my husband passed," she said softly. "He used to meet me here every Tuesday after his dialysis." This was our spot, I didn't say, "I'm sorry." Sometimes that phrase sounds like a receipt, offered too quickly, forgotten just as fast. Instead, I said, "Would you like me to bring your table back?" She looked confused. So I explained how we sometimes rearranged tables, how couples had spots that mattered. She nodded slowly. "Yes, please, I moved the chairs back myself, polished the table, replaced the small lamp that once sat in the center. And the next Tuesday, she returned. And the Tuesday after that. No punch card, no social media post. Just a quiet seat where grief could breathe and memory had permission to stay." Evan noticed. "She doesn't order anything fancy," he said one afternoon, watching Angela from behind the bar. "She doesn't come for the coffee," I replied. "She comes for the stillness." He nodded. "I used to think running a café was about the menu." "It is," I said, "but the real menu is emotional." That month, Evan introduced a new initiative, Anchor Stories. We set up a small bulletin board near the register and left blank note cards with pens. People began to write. At first, it was light. I met my wife here. She spilled espresso on my resume. This was the only place I felt safe studying when I was homeless. The barista gave me a free muffin the day I got laid off. That muffin meant everything. But over time, the stories grew deeper, more vulnerable, more human. Some were anonymous, some signed with full names, and even phone numbers, hoping a lost friend might walk through the door again. Evan and I read them every week, late at night, quietly, as if reading sacred text. "This place," he said once, holding a card that simply read, "You saved me." "It's so much more than I imagined." I smiled. "It always was. You just had to live through the loss to see it." He looked at me. "Is that what fatherhood feels like?" I paused, then nodded. "Yes, it's investing everything you have into something you may never see it return the way you planned, but knowing, deep down, that it was never about the return. It was about what you gave it from the start." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I want you to take the lead on our next project." I blinked. "Me?" "Yeah," he said. "We have the opportunity to expand. Next town over. Smaller space, but great foot traffic. I was going to take it on myself. But the more I think about it, the more I realize. I want you at the center of it." I didn't respond immediately. Not because I didn't want to, but because my chest was too full of the thing old men never say out loud. "I'm proud that you're proud of me." "You really want to do another shop?" I asked. "We finally got this one running smooth." "I don't want another shop," he said. "I want another home." And I understood what he meant. It wasn't about business growth. It was about planting something sacred in more places, letting more people feel seen, heard, anchored. So we began. Not quickly, not with consultants, just the two of us. Again, drawing sketches, arguing over counter heights, debating tile colors, talking about how to make a space feel like a hug. We were older now, slower, maybe, but we were wiser too. And this time, we didn't make the same mistakes. We shared everything, from costs to dreams to doubts. The paperwork was clear, the expectations cleaner, the respect deeper. And when we opened the second Rose and Anchor location 6 months later, I stood beside my son. Not in the shadows, not as a silent partner, but as the man who once gave everything, and now stood tall in the return. People came from neighboring towns just to meet the father and son who fixed what was broken. They asked us for advice, for hugs, for a little hope that love and legacy still mattered. And we gave it, one cup at a time. Because some profits can't be measured in dollars. Some investments take a lifetime to mature. And some partnerships, especially the ones sealed by blood, forgiveness, and an old thermos, are worth everything. The second cafe opened with far less fanfare than the first. No influencers, no grand ribbon cutting, no glossy marketing campaign with hashtags we barely understood. Just a handwritten sign taped to the door that said, "Rose and Anchor, now pouring in Elmwood. Come in, sit down, exhale." And somehow that was enough. People came, slowly, then steadily. And what they found inside wasn't a franchise or a chain. It was a feeling. Familiar, grounded, quietly powerful. This location was smaller, narrower. Only 8 tables, a smaller kitchen, and a few shelves of local goods. But it held a different kind of energy, almost like it knew it was a second chance. One morning, while replacing the bulb in the reading lamp near the corner booth, I overheard 2 teenage boys whispering behind me. "Dude," one of them said, "that's him." "Who?" "The dad." From the article, they meant me. They were talking about the article a local magazine had published, a piece titled "The Man Who Bought His Son's Debt and Gave Him Grace." It had gone around more than we expected, and I had hoped, foolishly, that time would bury the attention. I turned around, gave them a half smile. "Coffee or hot chocolate?" I asked. They blinked, then both said, "Hot chocolate." I made it myself, with the cinnamon stick trick Irene taught me years ago. When I handed it over, one of the boys said, "Thanks, Mr. Franklin. I wish my dad would talk to me the way you talk to your son." It hit me in the ribs, hard. "Sometimes," I said gently, "they don't know how. Not because they don't love you, but because they were never taught how to say it out loud." He nodded slowly, as if he wanted to believe it, even if it wasn't his truth yet. They left 5 minutes later, but the feeling stayed with me the rest of the day. Because that's the thing no one tells you about reconciliation. It's not just for the people involved. It ripples, it teaches, it invites. In the weeks that followed, I began to see faces that looked familiar, but not from the cafe. From my past. A man I worked warehouse shifts with 30 years ago. A woman who used to live down the street when Evan was a boy. Even a teacher who had once failed Evan for missing an exam, not knowing Irene was in the hospital that day. They came in quietly, ordered modestly, but they lingered long after their cups were empty. And I began to realize something. This cafe wasn't just for Evan and me. It was for everyone who'd ever wanted to make something right and never got the chance. One Thursday morning, as I swept the front steps, a delivery truck pulled up. From it stepped a man I hadn't seen in over 4 decades. His name was Howard. He was my older brother's best friend, practically an uncle to me in my teenage years. And the man who, once upon a time, asked to borrow money when I'd just landed my first full-time job. He never paid it back, not a dime, and we hadn't spoken since. He stood there now, a little heavier, a little grayer, holding a plain cardboard box. "I heard you were here," he said. "I am," I replied, cautious but not unkind. He looked around. "You did all this?" I nodded. "With my son." Howard swallowed hard. "He's lucky to have you." He set the box on the table beside us. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted you to know I remember." I never forgot what I took. I opened the box after he left. Inside was a crumpled envelope with 63 $10 bills and a note. For the past. plus interest. I hope it buys someone a warm drink today. I showed it to Evan that afternoon. He read it, then looked at me. You gonna forgive him? I already did, I said, years ago. I just didn't know he needed to hear it. That night, we quietly slipped the cash into the Anchor Fund drawer. Every bill. Because legacy isn't collecting on old debts. Legacy is learning when to release them. The second cafe grew slowly, humbly. We never tried to make it a copy of the first. It had its own rhythms, its own people. And in the corner, just behind the register, we kept a framed photo of the original shop, black and white, slightly grainy. Beneath it, a brass plate read, "Where we learned that forgiveness brews deeper than coffee." Some customers asked about it. Most didn't. But for those who did, we told them the truth. That this business wasn't built on caffeine. It was built on redemption. And that full circle didn't mean going back, it meant going forward, with deeper roots and a softer heart. And sometimes, the strongest foundation is made not of concrete or capital, but of conversations once avoided, debts quietly paid, and a name spoken with love after a long silence. Some people spend their lives trying to buy time. Others learn to sit with it. I used to chase minutes like they were gold dust, working double shifts, triple jobs, trying to squeeze meaning out of exhaustion. I thought that if I gave enough of myself to the clock, eventually it would pay me back in peace. It never did. But now? In this slower chapter, in this cafe rebuilt from the ashes of pride and silence, time finally feels honest. Not kind, necessarily, but honest. It gives what it gives, and it takes what it takes. But if you're present, really present, you can feel the moments that matter brush against your chest, like wind against an open collar. One of those moments came when Evan asked me to speak at a local business panel. "I'm not a speaker," I said, drying mugs behind the counter. "You're not a speaker," he agreed. "You're a storyteller." I snorted. That sounds like a polite way to say I talk too much. "No," he said, serious now. "It means people listen when you do." So I agreed. The panel was hosted in the local high school auditorium. 5 small business owners on stage, folding chairs, lukewarm coffee from a catering pot that tasted like it had been brewed through a sock. But the room was full, mostly young people, dreamers, some tired parents, a few small business owners hoping to learn something to keep their shop lights on one more month. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't bring slides. I didn't even bring notes. I just told them the truth. "I invested my retirement savings in my son's cafe," I began. And for a while, I thought I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. A few heads turned. One man chuckled. "But here's the real story," I continued. "The mistake wasn't the investment. The mistake was thinking the return would come in applause, or praise, or a seat at the table. What I got instead was rejection. Silence. Pain." I paused, letting the quiet settle. But I also got a second chance. Not to make more money, but to rebuild something more valuable. A relationship that had quietly been dying for years. Evan was sitting in the front row. He didn't blink, didn't shift. Just listened, like a son who was finally proud of who raised him. "I didn't buy a business," I said. "I bought time. Time to be present. Time to be seen again. Time to teach and be taught. And if that sounds like a waste of money to you, you're not ready to build something that lasts." The room clapped. Not wildly, not politely, but sincerely. Afterward, a teenage girl approached me. She was maybe 17, nervous, holding a small leather-bound notebook. "My dad's gone," she said. But if he were here, I wish he talked like you. I smiled. Maybe one day you'll talk like this to someone else. That's how we pass it down. She wiped her eye and said nothing else, just left. That night, back at the shop, Evan and I cleaned in silence. Then he said, "You know what I realized during your talk?" "What's that?" "That I've been afraid of becoming you." I stopped. "Not because you're bad," he clarified quickly. "Because you're good. You gave everything, worked yourself to the bone, sacrificed dreams I probably never even asked about. And part of me thought, if I become that, I'll disappear too." I nodded, understanding more than he could possibly know. "But then I realized something else," he continued. "You didn't disappear. You stayed, through all of it. And I think that's what makes you stronger than I ever gave you credit for." I didn't speak. I just placed a hand on his shoulder, a small gesture. But for us, it meant everything. The next morning, he surprised me. At the register, taped beside the Anchor Fund drawer, was a new photo. It was of me, standing behind the counter, handing a cappuccino to a woman mid-laugh. The light hit just right. My face was tired but kind. The moment was completely unposed. Beneath it was a quote. My words from the panel. I didn't buy a business. I bought time. Frank Franklin. Customers asked about it all day. Some nodded thoughtfully. One man took a photo of it and said, "I'm going to call my dad tonight." That's the kind of ROI no spreadsheet can measure. And that's when I realized I hadn't just given Evan a future. He'd given me one too. One where I didn't just survive old age, I belonged to it. Present. Accounted for. Still standing behind the counter, pouring coffee and stories into the world. Still shaping the kind of legacy you don't leave behind in a will, but in a room full of people who remember the way you made them feel. The older I get, the more I think about silence. Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind that comes with a quiet morning and a warm mug. I mean the kind of silence that lives in the gap between what fathers feel and what they're taught not to say. My father was a good man, a hard man, worked with his hands, rarely smiled in photographs, and thought showing love meant not letting you fall, not saying, "I love you." He never said it, not once, that I can remember. But I knew it. I saw it in the way he'd check the tire pressure on my bike without saying a word, in the way he'd sit in the truck until my school dance ended, just to drive me home, in the way he'd eat last, even when the meatloaf was thin. I promised myself that I'd be different when I had a son. But when Evan was little, I caught myself repeating the cycle. Nods instead of hugs, lectures instead of conversations, providing instead of being present. And when he started the café, I thought giving him $150,000 was enough. That provision meant connection. I was wrong. Money is loud. Love is quiet. And sometimes, if you're not careful, the money drowns out everything else. That's why, on a windy Friday afternoon, when the second location had hit its 6-month mark, when the cash flow was steady, when the team felt like family, I sat down with Evan and said something my own father never said to me. "I'm proud of you." He didn't respond right away, just stared down into his cup, swirling the foam with the tip of a spoon. "Thanks," he said eventually. "I've been waiting to hear that for a long time." I nodded. "I know." He looked up. "You ever wonder if we'd be closer now if I hadn't screwed it up first?" I smiled, a little sad. Sometimes the cracks let the light in. Sometimes the fall is the only thing that breaks the silence. He didn't say anything else, but his shoulders relaxed, just a little, and I realized that sometimes a man doesn't need more words. He just needs permission to stop carrying everything in his chest alone. The next week, we hosted Fathers and Founders Night at the café. It was Jamie's idea. "Let's do something different," she'd said. "Not just music or food. Let's tell stories." We invited 5 local small business owners and their fathers. Each pair was given 10 minutes to talk, openly, publicly, about how they built, broke, or rebuilt something together. I thought maybe 20 people would come. 87 showed up. Some sat on the floor. Some stood in the doorway. One man brought his teenage daughter and cried silently through 3 full speakers. When it was our turn, Evan took the mic first. He didn't read from notes. "I betrayed my dad," he said plainly. "He gave me everything. His savings, his faith, his time, and I thought I didn't need him." A few heads turned. Some winced. Others nodded, like they'd lived that story themselves. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just waited. And when I finally came around, he didn't say, "I told you so." He just showed me how to rebuild the right way. He paused, then looked at me. "I hope I can be that kind of father someday." My throat tightened. I took the mic. "I wasn't always the father he needed," I began, "but I was always the one who stayed, even when he walked away. And I think, in the end, that's what fatherhood is. It's not being perfect. It's being present long enough to matter again." The room fell still. Then someone clapped. Then everyone did. Not a roar. Just something slow. Earnest. Like respect being passed hand to hand. After the event, a man about my age came up to me. "You're lucky," he said. I nodded, but said nothing. He added, "My son doesn't talk to me. Not since I missed his wedding. You regret it?" "Every day." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then find a reason to show up. Don't wait for the invitation. Just show up anyway." He nodded, and I realized that was the secret no one tells you about repairing broken things. You don't need permission to start. You just need the will to show up again and again and again, until presence says what pride never could. Evan and I closed the shop late that night. We didn't talk much, but as we were wiping down tables, he pointed to the framed Anchor Stories board and said, "You think we should retire this? Start a fresh one?" I looked at the board. Full, overflowing, hundreds of cards from people we'd never meet again, telling stories we'd never forget. "No," I said, "leave it. Let people see that healing has layers. Let them know that some stories don't end. They just keep making room for more." He smiled, and as we locked the doors and stepped into the wind, I thought, maybe the most powerful thing a father can give is a place where nothing needs to be said anymore, because everything has already been lived. The first time Evan gave me a gift as an adult, I almost didn't know how to receive it. It was a simple thing. A wool coat, deep navy, double-breasted, with brass buttons. The kind of coat a man wears when he's stopped chasing youth and started honoring his years. "Happy birthday," he said, placing the box on my kitchen table. I opened it, half expecting a coffee mug, or maybe some gadget I wouldn't know how to use. But when I saw the coat thick, warm, sturdy, I just stared at it. "I thought," Evan hesitated, "you shouldn't have to go another winter wearing that old windbreaker." I smiled. "That old windbreaker has seen more battles than you know." "I know," he said. "That's why I wanted you to have something that kept you warm." Without all the weight, it was more than a coat. It was an offering, a small, wordless act of repair. Not dramatic, not public, but intentional. I put it on. It fit perfectly. "Looks good on you," he said. "It feels like respect," I replied. After that, the gifts kept coming, but not wrapped. They came in the way he deferred to me during team meetings, the way he asked my opinion before signing off on large orders, the way he gently corrected a new barista. No, that's not how Dad would do it. Watch him. They came in how he spoke to Jamie and the other staff when I wasn't in the room. My dad says customers remember how you made them feel, not just what you served. One afternoon, I caught him rereading a journal I'd left in the back room. I'd written notes about customer habits, tips on inventory tracking, even a few lines about gratitude. "You planning on publishing that?" he asked. "Planning on staying alive long enough that I won't need to," he laughed, then paused. "What if we turned it into a guidebook?" I raised an eyebrow. "For who?" "For the future," he said. "For anyone who takes over when we're not here anymore." That one hit different. He wasn't just thinking about the business. He was thinking about the legacy. 2 months later, he surprised me again. We'd just wrapped a particularly busy holiday weekend. Lines out the door. Sold out of scones before noon. Even ran out of cream. I was sweeping near the entrance when Evan called out, "Dad, come here for a second." I walked over, expecting some maintenance issue or maybe a quick inventory check. But he handed me an envelope. Inside was a deed. He'd added me as co-owner of the Elmwood property, not just in the books, not just in memory, but legally. "I know you didn't ask for this," he said quickly, "but you built this just as much as I did." Probably more. I want it to be official. I held the paper in my hands, stunned. "You don't need my name on the building," I said. "No," he replied. "I do." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time I didn't see my boy. I saw the man, the one I raised, the one I fought with, the one who cut me out, and then spent years learning how to bring me back in. "I accept," I said simply. Not because I needed the ownership, but because he needed to give it. And sometimes, part of fatherhood is letting your children restore you in their own way. That weekend, we hosted a small party for the staff. No customers, just music, pizza boxes, mismatched chairs, and too much laughter. Jamie made a slideshow of photos from the past year, some blurry, some unflattering, all perfect. At the end, she pulled out a framed photo. It was from the early days, me and Evan, standing shoulder to shoulder in the original shop. He's grinning. I'm exhausted. And Irene's rose tattoo logo glows faintly on the door behind us. The frame had an engraving at the bottom, "Built on Trust." Restored with grace, Evan handed it to me. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For staying." I looked around the room, at the laughter, at the light, at the faces of young people who saw me not as an old man, but as a living part of something good. "I never left," I said. "You just had to find your way back to where I was standing all along." And he did. Not with flowers, not with speeches, but with action. And when the last of the pizza was gone and the music had faded, and we stood outside locking the doors together, I knew. This wasn't just his business anymore. It wasn't even ours. It belonged to everyone we had poured into it. One apology, one espresso, one honest day's work at a time. Because forgiveness may not show up on the receipt, but it always leaves a tip. Retirement used to mean a gold watch, a cake with too much frosting, and a future of slow mornings and early dinners. At least that's what the world told me. "You've earned your rest," people would say. "Put your feet up. Relax." But what if rest isn't what your soul asks for? What if, after decades of working to provide for others, you realize that the greatest peace comes not from stepping away, but from stepping deeper in? That was the question I found myself facing one quiet morning as I sat by the front window of Rose and Anchor, the new coat Evan had given me, draped neatly on the back of my chair. The cafe was calm still, buzzing from the early rush, but not yet climbing into the chaos of lunch. Jamie was behind the bar, training a new hire. Evan was at the other location, overseeing repairs after a burst pipe. And I, for once, had nothing urgent to do. No spreadsheets, no supplier drama, no broken register, just a warm drink and a sunbeam cutting through the steam. It should have felt like retirement, but it didn't. It felt like pause, and then, like purpose. A young man walked in. Nervous posture, collared shirt slightly wrinkled. He paced near the counter, then sat down in the corner booth, the one Angela used to sit at with her late husband. He didn't order anything, just pulled out a notebook and stared at it. Something told me to approach him. "Everything all right?" I asked gently. He looked up, startled. "Sorry, I'll buy something. I just needed a place to sit. I'll be out of your way soon." "You're not in the way," I said, "but the seat comes with a story. You up for one?" He blinked, then nodded. So I told him about Angela, about grief, about second chances and quiet places that hold loud memories. He listened, his hand resting on the notebook. When I finished, he said, "I just lost my dad." 2 weeks ago. He always talked about opening a coffee shop, even had sketches. I found them in his desk. I think I'm supposed to do something with them, but I don't know where to start. I sat down across from him, and for the next hour, we talked about licensing, about beans, about what makes a cafe breathe. But mostly, we talked about fathers and what they leave behind when they're no longer able to finish what they started. That night, I told Evan about the conversation. "You think he's serious?" he asked. "I think he's searching. Should we help him?" I smiled. We already did. And that's when it hit me. Maybe this is retirement, not an exit, a return, not an end to the work, but a new kind of work. Mentorship, guidance, presence without pressure. The kind of presence my father never had the chance to give me, but that I now had the privilege to offer others. I began to meet with the young man, Tobias, every Sunday. We'd sit by the window, compare ideas, tear apart his first cafe name, which, to his credit, he took like a champ. Been there, done that, was officially vetoed. I helped him rewrite his business plan, reviewed vendors, even introduced him to one of our trusted suppliers, and little by little, I saw it happen again. The spark, the shaping, the becoming. He launched his cafe 9 months later, smaller than ours, a walk-up window, 2 benches outside. But it had something, a sincerity you can't fake. And on opening day, I stood in the back of the small crowd, hands in my coat pockets, watching him greet each customer by name, just like Evan used to, just like I used to. He spotted me through the glass, raised his cup in a quiet salute. I raised mine back. A week later, Evan handed me a manila envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "A proposal." I opened it. Inside, the framework for a mentorship program. Anchor Rising. A way to offer free coaching and resources for young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. "I thought you might want to lead it," Evan said. I didn't speak right away, because once again, I found myself standing at the edge of a chapter I never expected to write. "This isn't retirement," I finally said. He grinned. "No, it's reinvestment. And maybe that's the only kind of ending worth pursuing. Not one where you leave the room quietly, but one where you open the door wider and hold it for someone else." These days, people still ask when I plan to stop working. My answer? When the stories stop showing up at my counter, when the grief stops sitting in the corner booth, when the next young man stops needing a place to be brave. Until then, I'll be here. Not retired, not tired, just ready. Because some men leave behind businesses, others leave behind blueprints. But the luckiest of us, we get to build people. One cup, one conversation, one second chance at a time. There had always been a table in my life that stayed empty. Not literally. There were always chairs to fill, always meals to serve, but emotionally, spiritually. A table in my heart that had no one sitting across from me. It was the table where my father should have been. He died when I was 30. I had just started my third job. Evan was still a toddler, and we hadn't spoken in almost 6 years. Not really. Our words had turned transactional, dull, like receipts you forget to throw away but keep in your glove box, just in case. He never saw me as a man, never told me I'd done enough. And when the call came from my brother, he's gone, I felt two things: relief and regret. Relief that the ache might quiet now. Regret that we never found a way back to the table. Years later, as Evan and I were cleaning up from a mentorship workshop, I saw him sitting at one of our back tables alone, staring out the window, swirling the last inch of coffee in his cup. "You okay?" I asked, sliding into the seat across from him. He nodded. "Just thinking." "Dangerous." He smiled. "I was thinking about your dad." That caught me off guard. "What about him?" "I never met him," he said, "but I wonder what he'd think if he walked in here today. Saw you. Saw what you built." I looked away for a moment, pretending to scan the shelf of syrups. "I think he'd say nothing," I said quietly. "Just nod. Maybe ask if the lights were energy efficient." Evan chuckled. "But you know what I wish?" I continued. "I wish he'd sit down at a table like this, just once, and ask me what I loved, not what I earned." Evan didn't say anything. He just listened. And sometimes, silence is the most healing thing a son can offer. That conversation stayed with me for days. It followed me into my morning routine, into the way I watched our customers, into how I sat with Jamie and offered advice, into the letters I began writing. Actual letters to Tobias and the other young business owners I'd started mentoring. It even changed how I looked at our regulars. One man in particular. Ben, a retired math teacher, had been coming every Thursday for months. He always sat alone, always read the paper, always ordered a plain black coffee, and left a $20 tip without fail. But something about him shifted in recent weeks. His eyes dimmed, his shoulders sank. "So one Thursday," I asked. "Everything all right, Ben?" He folded his newspaper with careful hands, looked up. "My son hasn't spoken to me in over a year." I waited. He said I never supported him, that I made everything about achievement, and I did. I really did. He shrugged. "I thought I was preparing him. Turns out I was losing him." He took a sip, then added, "You ever feel that way?" I sat down and told him the truth. I told him about Evan, about the café, about the betrayal, about the debt, about the return. When I finished, Ben looked at me for a long time. "You think it's too late?" he asked. "No," I said. "But it's not up to time. It's up to you." He returned the next week with a letter in his coat pocket. Said he'd mailed it. Wasn't sure what to expect. I told him to bring it to the café if a reply ever came. 2 months later, he did. His son had written back. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't long. But it ended with, "Maybe we could meet. I miss your voice." Ben wept at the corner table. I brought him a second cup and left him alone with the joy. It became clear to me over time that Rose and Anchor was never just a business. It was the table I'd never had growing up, and it was the table I now got to offer to others. People who missed their fathers. People who were fathers, trying to make up for mistakes. People who sat with their guilt and needed a safe place to set it down. One day, Evan suggested we start a special night every month. The empty chair. We'd reserve one table in the corner, always the same one. A place for anyone grieving a father they'd lost, or the father they never had. A candle, a fresh cup of coffee, a note card and pen. People could write. Sit. Say nothing. Say everything. We didn't advertise it. We didn't post about it online. But word spread, and soon, every month, that chair was never truly empty. Sometimes we'd find notes like, "I forgive you, even if you never asked. I wish I had said I was proud of you too. Maybe in another life, we could have met in the middle." We laminated them, bound them into a small book, and kept that book on a shelf labeled "Letters to the Fathers Who Left Too Soon or Stayed Too Distant." Customers flipped through it quietly. Some cried, some smiled, some added their own. And slowly we realized we weren't just building a café. We were building a sanctuary. One night, as we closed up, Evan said, "You know, Dad, I used to think we lost years we'd never get back." "We did," I said. "That's the truth. But maybe," he continued, "we're giving those years to others now." I looked at him. This man who once shut the door on me, now holding the keys to something greater. "Yes," I said softly, "and that's the most powerful kind of justice. The kind that doesn't punish, the kind that heals. Because redemption isn't about rewriting the past. It's about offering a table, even if you never got to sit at one yourself, and watching someone else, someone younger, someone scared, someone hopeful take that seat. And stay. In the coffee world, there's something called a legacy roast. It's not a marketing term, it's a philosophy. A legacy roast isn't just about flavor, it's about meaning. You take the best beans, aged, patient, complex, and blend them with something new, something young, bright, unfinished. Together, they create something neither generation could achieve alone. We never planned to launch one. But one day, Jamie brought it up during our weekly meeting. We've been doing mentorship. We've shared our story. What if we made a roast that tells the story? Evan raised an eyebrow. "You mean like a symbolic blend?" Jamie nodded. One part old world depth, one part modern profile. We call it the Legacy Roast, a tribute to fathers and founders. I smiled. It was a good idea, but more than that, it was right. So we did it. We partnered with a local roaster. Evan handled the sourcing. I wrote the product note. This roast is for the men who gave without applause, who stayed in the background until the spotlight turned and revealed they were the ones holding up the stage. It's bold, but not boastful. Warm, with the strength of something time-tested. Just like the fathers who poured into us, even when we forgot to say thank you. We launched it with no fanfare, no influencer campaign, just a handwritten sign on the counter. New blend, the Legacy Roast, brewed with memory, served with respect. The first customer to order it was a young woman in her 20s. She read the note, then asked quietly, "Can I buy 2 bags? One for me, and one for the man who raised me." She left a $10 tip, didn't say another word, but her eyes said everything. That roast did something I hadn't expected. It brought out the quiet people, the ones who never felt seen in our original story, Foster dads, stepdads, grandfathers, mentors, uncles, men who didn't share DNA, but shared devotion. One man, Greg, told us, "I raised my sister's kids after she passed. Never thought I was a real dad. But this place? You make me feel like I count. You do count," Evan said. And I watched that man tear up in the middle of our Wednesday lunch rush. We started collecting their stories, too. Not just biological bonds, but chosen ones. Evan called it the other father's wall. We hung Polaroids and short notes near the entrance. Uncle Ray gave me my first set of tools, Coach Jim, taught me discipline and how to tie a tie. Miss Darlene. She's technically my grandma, but she's the only parent I ever had. One boy came in with his older brother, probably 20 years apart in age. The younger one pointed to the wall and whispered, "You should be up there." The older one nodded, quietly. They left a photo the next day. One evening, Evan and I were closing the register when he said, "You know what I've learned?" I smirked. That customers never take the receipt, even when they say they want it. He chuckled. "No, I've learned that legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you build into others while you're still here." I nodded. "And what you repair before it's too late." He paused, then asked a question that, in all our years, he'd never asked before. "Did you ever feel like I didn't deserve forgiveness?" The room was quiet. Even the machines seemed to hush. "I felt hurt," I said. "I felt disappointed. But no, not once did I think you were beyond redemption, because love doesn't keep ledgers." He exhaled, like something heavy had finally left his lungs. "I kept a ledger," he admitted, "for years. Tallied every slight. Every time I thought you didn't believe in me. I believed in you more than I believed in anything," I said. "Even when you forgot who you were, I didn't. That's what scared me," he whispered. "That I could fail someone who never stopped loving me." I put my hand on his shoulder. "You didn't fail me," I said. "You found me. It just took longer than either of us expected." The legacy roast sold out that first week. We ordered twice as much the next time, then 3 times. But the most important bag, Evan placed it on the shelf at home, right beside a photo of Irene. He said it was a reminder of where it all began, of the man he nearly lost, of the future he almost burned down, and the truth he'd finally learned to carry, that the people who pour into you are never gone. They live in the way you pour into others. One cup at a time. The last cup of coffee in a pot is never the strongest. It doesn't have the rich oils that rise to the top or the sharp kick of the first pour. But sometimes, if you let it sit just long enough, it holds a depth the others don't. Something rounder, quieter, earned. That's how this chapter of my life feels. Not the bold beginning, not the bitter betrayal, but the steady warmth of something redeemed. It happened on a Tuesday. The cafe was quiet, off-season. Rain brushing softly against the windows, like fingers on piano keys. Evan was late, which wasn't like him. Jamie was managing the floor, calm and capable as always. I was in the back, going over supply invoices, when the bell above the door chimed. I glanced up. Evan stood there, but he wasn't alone. Beside him was a woman in her early 30s, nervous, kind eyes, hands resting protectively on a round belly, and beside her, holding one of Evan's fingers tightly, was a boy. Maybe 5 years old. "Dad," Evan said, voice careful, "there's someone I want you to meet." I stood slowly. The boy peeked around Evan's leg. "This is Noah," Evan said, "my son." Time paused, not for drama, not for shock, but for weight. Because that was the moment the story shifted again. The moment the circle wasn't just closed, it expanded. "He's yours?" I asked, gently. Evan nodded. "Long story. One I'm ready to tell." The woman stepped forward. "I'm Rachel," she said. Well, it's been a winding road. But Evan told me everything. About you. About this place. About what you gave up. And what you never stopped giving." I looked at Evan. He wasn't a boy anymore. He wasn't even just a man. He was now a father. And suddenly, everything I'd fought for, every quiet night, every dollar handed over, every ache swallowed in silence, it all made sense. We sat at the window table, the same one where Evan had once told me I was no longer needed. Now he asked me to stay late, to listen, to hold the story like a fragile cup. He told me how he'd drifted after the café's success, traveled, made mistakes, fell in love, lost it, found it again. How Noah was born during a season of silence between him and Rachel. How he wasn't sure he deserved fatherhood. And how Rachel's God, bless her, told him he didn't have to deserve it. He just had to show up. Like I did. That evening, after they left, I stayed behind. Lights dimmed, chairs stacked, coffee pot washed. But I poured one last cup, from a fresh batch. Not because I needed caffeine, but because I needed the ritual. I sat at the counter and stared out the rain-streaked window, holding that cup like it was the first I'd ever poured. And I thought I may have started this story as the man who was cut out, forgotten, cast aside, dismissed. But I will end it as the man who stayed, who forgave, who rebuilt, who was remembered, not as a source of money, not as a shadow of obligation, but as a root, a foundation, a legacy. Weeks later, Evan came by with a small, wrapped box. Inside was a key. Not to the cafe, to his house. "Noah calls you Grandpa now," he said, "and Rachel said she wants you to feel like you're always welcome." I smiled. I've always been welcome, even when you didn't know it yet. He hugged me, longer this time, and when he pulled away, he said, "I hope I'm half the father you are." I shook my head. "No, be better." He nodded. "I will." There's a photo that hangs on the wall now behind the counter, next to the legacy roast display. It's me, Evan, Rachel, and little Noah, standing outside the cafe, steam rising behind us, the sky painted with soft morning gold. Under it is a small plaque. "A cup of coffee only lasts a moment, but the hands that serve it can change a lifetime. Franklin family." And every time I see it, I remember. You can lose everything and still come back stronger. You can be betrayed and still choose to love again. You can be forgotten and still become the most unforgettable part of someone's story. Because fatherhood isn't about blood or business or balance sheets. It's about being there, even when they walk away, especially when they come back. And when it's your turn to hand over the legacy, do it with grace, do it with open hands, and always, always make sure the coffee's still warm. Thank you for listening to this story on Revenge Files. If this journey moved you, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming the man they never thought you could be. Would you like to begin the next story?